thing is, you need to build an ability to just be yourself and not be doing something. That's what the phones are taking away.
Yes.
Is the ability to just sit there, like this. That's being a person, right?
Yes.
No one can. You gotta check, because underneath everything in your life, there's that thing, that empty, forever empty. You know what I'm talking about?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes,
Yes,
I know what you're talking about.
That knowledge that it's all for nothing and you're alone. It's down there. And sometimes when things clear away, you're not watching it, you're in your car, and you start going, oh no, here it comes, that I am alone, like it starts to visit on you. Just the sadness.
Yes.
Life is tremendously sad just by, being in it. And so you're driving, and then you go, that's why we text and drive. I look around, pretty much 100% of people driving are texting.
Yes.
And they're killing, everybody's murdering each other with their cars.
Yes.
But people are willing to risk taking a life and ruining their own because they don't want to be alone for a second, because it's so hard. I was in my car one time, and a Bruce Springsteen song comes on. And I heard it, and it gave me kind of like a fall back to school depression feeling. It made me really sad.
Yeah.
And I go, okay, I'm getting sad. I got to get the phone and write hi to like 50 people. And then, somebody cool writes back. I started to get that sad feeling, and I was reaching for the phone, and I said, you know what, don't. Just be sad. Just let the sadness, just stand in the way of it, and let it hit you like a truck. And I let it come, and Bruce, and I just started to feel, oh my God. And I pulled over, and I just cried so much. And it was beautiful. It was like this beautiful, it's just this, sadness is poetic. You're lucky to live sad moments. And then I had happy feelings because when you let yourself feel sad,
yes,
your body has like antibodies. It has happiness that comes
rushing in
to meet the sadness. So I was grateful to feel sad, and then I met it with true, profound happiness. It was such a trip, and the thing is, because we don't want that first bit of sad, you never feel completely sad or completely happy. You just feel kind of satisfied with your product.
Yes.
And then you die. So that's why I don't want to get a phone for my kids. That's what I'm
Excuse me. Oh, hi, sorry, just texting. Hi, welcome to Darkwood Brew. I'm Eric Elmas, your host, and Darkwood Brew is that place where we integrate modern interactive web technology, beautiful jazz, arts, biblical scholarship, and well, you never know exactly what's going to happen. This evening we are stepping back into a series that we occasionally step back into here at Darkwood Brew called Gifts of the Dark Wood, exploring the gift of emptiness. The gift of emptiness. Darkwood gift is one of those gifts that life hands us that we don't necessarily think about as being gifts. Gifts like failure, lostness, uncertainty, and emptiness. These very characteristics of life can be tragic or can be profoundly the start of something new and wonderful, depending on how we negotiate those aspects. How do we turn tragedy or the darker side of life into truly the gifted side of life? When Jesus once made a statement that really speaks to the Darkwood gift of emptiness, when he said that those who try to make their life secure will lose it, but those who lose their life will keep it. That seems like a strange statement to make, that if you lose your life, you will keep it. Many of us think he's talking about our physical lives, that if we'll sacrifice our physical life, we'll keep it. But Jesus' focus was so much on this world that it oftentimes pays to pay attention to, well, how would that work in this world? Losing our life, keeping it? What if he's really talking about losing something about our lives that really has to do with life itself while we're still alive? For instance, if you knew you were going to die on this day, today, what would be the significance of your life? Just think for a moment, what would be the significance of your life? What would be its meaning to you? Don't touch that dial. It's not a technical goof. I'm really asking you, what would you think about being the significance of your life? How it mattered to you? You see, all of us, we have a storyline, a narrative to our life that we hold close to us, oftentimes below the surface in our subconscious. But it really is the story about why our life matters, why it's worth it to endure the struggles of life, what is its significance. And sometimes it's that very life story we need to hold loosely, even let go of. Because there are stories we tell ourselves that are good and right and true enough, but there are also stories we tell ourselves about why life is significant, or why our life on earth is important or matters, that might not necessarily be so true. Some of it we simply make up out of whole cloth, but other parts of our story may have been true in the past, but the story of life has moved on. And if we haven't kept up with the change of our story, it can be as damaging to us as if it was a fictitious lie. For instance, take a father who would say perhaps, oh, by the way, everything I'm about to say about this father bears no resemblance to the person pictured there, Scott Grissell, the producer of Darkwood Brew. That just happens to be a picture we found of him. But if you were a father and you said, well, part of the significance of my life is I'm close to my children, that may have been true and may be still true, but in some people's lives that may have been true back in a certain time, but time has moved on and perhaps the father got a bit busy, or the children, and though that story is no longer true. And so as long as we continue to maintain that story, we actually are not living life according to the reality of the situation. Far better to embrace an emptying of that story. My children and I are no longer so close. So that then we can ask ourselves, is that part of our significance, or can we make adjustments? Individuals have stories, some of which are accurate, some of which aren't, but also communities have stories as well. A lot of organizations, the most dangerous story they have has to do with what made them a success in the past, but where the past has become truly the past. I remember as a child, at Christmas time, I would know Christmas was coming because our family would receive the Sears and Roebuck Christmas catalog, and my brother and I, we leaf through its pages and star the different toys and so forth that we love, and put big stars around the ones we really wanted, and that's what it meant to prepare for Christmas. Well, Sears and Roebuck, of course, made a fortune, many fortunes over the years, being a catalog company. But at one point, catalogs really weren't what people were using to buy goods and services. They were going to department stores and later shopping malls. And Sears, though, taking that old story, continued to believe it was a catalog company until it nearly bankrupted them. So oftentimes, again, unless you're willing to lose your story, you're in actually the most dangerous place you can be. Human civilization also has its own stories that have endured the test of ages, and sometimes those are perfectly true enough, but sometimes the tectonic plates seem to shift underneath those stories on us, and we need to realize it before it's too late. For instance, we have existed since the beginning of humanity with the story that the earth will always be around, that it will always provide for us, always have those resources. Many are wondering if that's a story that we need to let go of in our day to adjust to a new reality. Well, joining us to explore the Darkwood gift of emptiness, those adjustments we need to make in our story that keep us creative and keep us on that positive engagement with life, is Chuck Marohnic, former music director of Darkwood Brew. He's not in the studio with us tonight, but he'll be joining us via Skype. We're looking forward to talking with Chuck and relating not only his own experiences of the gift of emptiness, but also relating them to how they work out in music as well. So before we go any further, though, let's let the Brews brothers take us into the episode. Well, in the name of exploring the Darkwood gift of emptiness, Chris Alexander is not here this evening as the co-host. She's actually in Hollywood, California, where she has gone to see her daughter Maddie perform her first stand-up comedy routine at the Comedy Shop in Hollywood. So, pretty special time for Chris and especially for Maddie. Tracy Halverson is our Numa Divina reader. Gave her the night, so we're really empty this evening. So last week I was on the blogs, looking out over the internet, and was on a particular blog named John's Ramblings. He's an Irish blogger from Cork, Ireland, and John has been making prayer beads lately. He's a Protestant, but he's been making prayer beads, and this was one of those sets of prayer beads that he's made. Notice that it's not full of beads. There are blank spaces in the prayer bead. He puts them there intentionally to remind himself that prayer is not simply about talking to God, but also emptying yourself out and being quiet, listening for God. It's those empty spaces we kind of get nervous about in our lives. We pick up our cell phones and start texting when we have a moment rather than simply sit in emptiness. And certainly prayer invites us into those periods of emptiness. Part of the reason why those periods of emptiness are not only important for prayer, but really for life itself, is really explained well by David White, the poet, who once recently said in a seminar at Bellevue University near Omaha, he said, in order to have a true conversation with life, you must have a healthy relationship with the unknown. Otherwise, you're constantly editing out reality to conform to your old story. That's why Sears and Roebuck nearly went bankrupt. They kept editing out the story that was breaking in upon them, that is, that people are not buying things through catalogs very much, and only taking in those aspects of realities that confirmed their old story. We do this kind of thing all the time. David suggests we need to cultivate that healthy relationship with the unknown, that place in front of us, that character that really represents the story that we don't know yet, in order to live a real life. But I wonder, the unknown may seem scary, but is that really what's so frightening? That something is out there that we may not know is coming into our story yet. I mean, if I told you that at the end of this episode, $1,000 would be placed in somewhere between $1,000 and $10,000 would be placed in your bank account, would you fear the unknown future? The future is only unknown when when we're not. I mean, it's only scary when we're expecting something other than something good. Now, Anthony DeMello once observed in his book Awareness that it's not that we fear the unknown. You can't fear something that you do not know. Nobody is afraid of the unknown. What you really fear is the loss of the known. That's what you fear. It's the loss of those stories we maintain, that tell us, this is why my life is significant. Our Pneuma reading this evening comes from 1 Samuel 16, and it's a story that really deals with that need to let go of a story and then to realize why that's so important, the creative potential of letting go and keeping that loose. Instead of reading it tonight, I'm actually going to just simply talk it through. You can read the actual text later if you like. But the background of it is, it comes from the book. Samuel was a prophet in Israel. He comes from a time before there were kings in Israel. He was one of occasional series of charismatic leaders who would rise up during a time of crisis, and then when the crisis was over, they would simply go back to their own thing. And Israel was basically a very, very loosely confederated tribe, a set of 12 tribes. But at some point, Samuel's the kind of that leader, but he realizes that the threats that are coming at Israel from outside are too great for just kind of rallying the troops like this. They really kind of need a king. The people are calling for a king. God finally says, the people, we need to get a king. And so Samuel has to set aside his story that he's the leader. And set that aside in order to follow God's story that's breaking in. God says, I will show you the new king. And sure enough, God does. It's in King Saul. And now Saul was this very, very intelligent, gifted leader who was the very first king of Israel. But Saul had a bit of a problem letting go of the story when it needed to change. In fact, as time went on, Saul's leadership became more and more kind of at variance to where God was wanting Israel to go, according to the book of Samuel. At one point, there was a conflict between Saul and Samuel, and Saul, pictured here, was trying to prevent Samuel from stomping off, and he grabbed his garment and tore it, and that's the Hebrews storyteller's way of signifying that there is a rupture not only between Saul and Samuel, but also Saul and his story, the kingship. It's over. So in the book of, in the 16th chapter of Samuel, we find God telling Samuel that once again, Samuel's story needs to change. He's grieving the fact that Saul is no longer going to be king because he's been a close friend and confidant. Samuel has really been, there's too many S's in Hebrew. Samuel has really been Saul's right-hand person throughout, for many, many years. They've been close friends. He's grieving the fact that his kingship is over. And he's in this strange in-between place where he knows that the old story has to go, but the new story has not yet appeared. Can you think of times in your life, perhaps, where you know that a chapter needs to end, or perhaps you just know it has ended, either because maybe it hasn't even ended because of your choice, it's just ended. And yet the new story, or what is the new significance, has not yet emerged. That's a particularly difficult place of emptiness, and that's exactly where Samuel found himself. And the Hebrews, they knew how to address those terrifying moments in our life oftentimes by using humor. And if you're aware of this in the Hebrew story, and not just simply thinking the Bible must be serious all the time, ever, you can pick up on this humor. See, Samuel is then, the chapter opens by God telling Samuel, first of all, get over this. Get over your grieving here. I've got a new king to anoint. And that king is in Bethlehem. And now Bethlehem was just the smallest tribe in Israel. It was kind of this renegade tribe that was at conflict, actually, with Saul for much of his kingship. And for Samuel to actually go to Bethlehem to anoint a new king would have really put his life at great danger. I mean, Saul still thinks he's king. And no matter how good of friends they'd been in the past, if Saul had the slightest whiff that Samuel was going to Bethlehem to anoint a new king, he would not be long for this world. Saul would not hesitate to kill him. But so God says, go to Bethlehem, the king will be found there, and the king will be found in the house of Jesse. So it will be one of Jesse's sons. Now you'd think that if God could tell Samuel that the king is one of Jesse's sons, that God might actually give the son's name to Samuel, but God doesn't. So here he is, he's risking his life and limb to find this king, and God has left out the most critical piece of information there is. And so he goes to Bethlehem, he finds Jesse. Jesse trots out 7 sons before Samuel. And you think, so now how is he going to decide which is to be king? God doesn't simply flash neon signs saying, this is the one, this is the one. Nor does God ever speak audibly in the Bible. All those phrases that say, and God said, they don't have to do with God speaking audibly, as if God spoke back in biblical times and somehow doesn't speak today. No, he had to go on to the interior to find that word of God, those hunches and intuitions that kept returning and producing certain feelings of a life, something clicking into place, a message coming through. Samuel was one who created a lot of empty space, in his prayer life and in his daily routine, to listen for God, to pay attention to those inner voices. So the first son comes up. He's handsome, he looks like muscular, he's the oldest son. He looks totally like kingship material. The guy, could kind of cut him out of a Ralph Lauren photo spread, kind of aristocratic, kind of, got the king thing going on, But Samuel isn't fooled by that. He's listening to those interior voices, and God says, I don't pay attention to the outside, I pay attention to the inside. This is not the king. Well, so the next one is trotted forward, and once again, this isn't the king. And the next one, no, this isn't it either. Now, put yourself in Samuel's sandals. If you're trying to pay attention to those deep intuitions, about who's going to be king, if the first three aren't the king, you're probably not too worried. You've got several more to go to choose from. But as they start whittling down, you might start getting a little nervous. Like, I hope I didn't miss the one. There's only three more left now. Now there are only two. I can imagine them feeling a combination of terror and deep excitement. Like, the king's going to be one of these two. The king's going to be one of these two. I hope I get it right. I hope I get it right. How does Samuel get it right? How do you get it right when a news story is trying to break in and you have been given an array of choices and you've decided, now this isn't the way to go, this isn't the way to go, this isn't the way to go, and you're starting to run out of options, Well, Samuel goes to that place, that deep place within. Some people compare that deep place to a well, where the water is way down, actually below where you can see. Inside each of us, there is a place where the waters are still, very still, where you're not reacting to anything, you're not feeling judged by anything or anyone, even God, nor are you judging anyone, where you simply are. And the mystics always, and the prophets always paid attention to that stillness, that when the waters stirred then, they knew to pay attention to the stirring of their stillest waters. So that second to last son comes forward, and Samuel's paying attention to his well, and nothing's stirring. He knows, okay, this isn't the one. So now there's only one left. That's got to be the king, right? If your story is breaking in and you've been following God and you've kind of whittled down the options and there's only one left, well, of course that's the one that God wants for you, right? That's what you or I would do, maybe, but that's not what one of the greatest prophets who ever lived in Israel would do. No, Samuel knew that even that one, even though logic would say that that's the one, this isn't about logic. It's about paying attention to that well, that place of stillness. And so that last one has to come before him, and Samuel's there again, feeling the waters stir. You could feel that sense of excitement, that place, that's just that clicked in place that says, yes, yes, yes. He's feeling, and nothing. Nothing. Well, now he's got a choice. He can either admit that he's just completely not seen any king in these midst, and maybe he's just made up this whole thing in his head the whole time. That's a pretty difficult admission. Or he could maybe stir those waters himself, well, this must be the king, so I'll just be happy that this is the king. Well, Samuel was one of those people who was willing to let go of his story. Let go of even the story that God had led him to Bethlehem. Let go of even the story that he was a prophet of God. If it meant that he'd gone through every one and there's no king. And he embraced the emptiness of that story. And within that emptiness, God spoke to Samuel. He said, go, ask Jesse if he's got another son. You can imagine him saying, well, what do you mean another son? I've just asked him to bring out all his sons. Go ask Jesse if there's another son. Well, but he knows that I'm choosing the king amongst his sons. Surely would have brought every single one of them. Ask Jesse. So he does. You have any other sons? Sure enough. There's one son, his youngest son, has been off tending the sheep. And so he brings that son forward. And as that son comes forward and stands before him, the waters in his well stir like nobody's business. Yes, 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 this is the king. This is him. Can you think of any king in Israel who was a shepherd early on in life? This king was King David, the greatest king who ever lived in Israel's history, according to the Bible. The king who would one day be part of the lineage even of Jesus. a king that came onto into the Israel story because of one who was willing to embrace the gift of emptiness. Well, we are going to be turning to Chuck Marohnic very shortly here, and before we do, Matt, you want to introduce the band for a moment?
Yeah, we're very excited for the feature tonight to do a Chuck Marohnic composition entitled You Alone, and that will feature Miss Carol Rogers. Introducing the fellows in the band: Matt Amandus on the keyboards, Carlos Figueroa on the drums, Steve Gomez on the bass. And here is a little taste of Chuck Marohnic, Pat the Hat.
Thanks, guys. Well, Chuck, it's great to have you back at Darkwood Brew, even if it is from a distance. Good to see you. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I'm just messing with you, Eric.
Oh, that's good. That's part of the old Chuck story that I know and love.
A little taste of emptiness there, you know.
That's right. Oh, thanks a lot.
It's good to see you too.
Yeah, you had me panicked there for a moment. I was going to have to really work on embracing that emptiness. Yeah. You're coming to us from Louisville, Kentucky, where you've been hard at work for the better part of the last year or so on a pretty incredible project.
Yeah. I'm involved with the Jazz Psalms project, which actually began about 2 years ago. And to date, just today, I'm in the middle of the 72nd one. Not number 72, but the 72nd of 150. So I'm approaching the halfway point pretty soon.
That's awesome. Yeah, I've been hearing some pretty great stuff coming out of your studio, those Jazz Psalms. And of course, Carol Rogers oftentimes has been singing with you in that, and she's here tonight joining us. So.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, Carol will be joining me and the Music Serving the Word ministry musicians in Denver. Will be at Highlands Ranch St. Luke's United Methodist Church in Highlands Ranch, Colorado, in November the 10th, I believe it is.
Great.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So Chuck, you are one. I know you have had for many years a contemplative prayer routine, and I know that this Darkwood gift of emptiness resonated with you. What do you see in the gift of emptiness and the spiritual life?
Well, emptiness is a practice that allows one to learn how to be quiet, learn how to listen. And as a result, the more intense the listening becomes, the more intense that process becomes, the less our ego seems to manifest itself, and we begin to discover new things that emanate out of the silence of that emptiness.
So are there ways that you intentionally nurture that in your life?
Well, yes, I do. I've been practicing centering prayer now for over 20 years. And currently I'm using the Jesus prayer again. I started that way, and then I sort of changed it and went to different mantras and so forth. But now I'm back to the Jesus prayer, which I find amazing. The Jesus prayer is, Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy on me. And oftentimes I can't even get past the word Lord. It's just I just hit that, and all of a sudden everything freezes up, and that seems to be sufficient. And the practice of centering prayer is full of surprises. just when you think you're going to discover something, you find yourself caught up in all the garbage of what's been going on recently in your life. And Thomas Keating, he refers to that, the monkeys in the trees. We're going through all these things in our head, and so you have to learn how to get rid of that stuff. But you can never really turn it on or off. It's not something that at will that you have control of. You have to. It's really a question of just giving yourself completely and totally to the experience, and asking to be for the strength and for the wisdom to accept God and to be present to God. And when it happens, it's unbelievable. It's never anything that you would predict.
Yeah.
It always comes as a surprise.
So centering prayer has to do with kind of setting aside your agenda, setting aside
completely
all that, and
just getting rid of everything that's been going on, and it's an opportunity to just be quiet. Oftentimes it's just listening. That's all. And and you can actually, when you listen, really listen, it's amazing how much what you can hear at one time. I have a window right next to the chair where I do my centering prayer, and oftentimes that window is open, and I'll just listen to the birds, and I'll hear, when I first start, I'll hear 2 or 3, 4, whatever, and then within a relatively short period of time, I'm hearing hundreds of birds, that are actually quite far away. So it's amazing, and then when it's over, you wonder, well, what was all that about? But you're in a beautiful, peaceful place, and that practice allows you to deal with the obstacles of the day, deal with the things that come to you. And then many of them are obstacles, the challenges of the day, the nervous energy of the day, the unsuspected things that come your way that without that practice could possibly send you off into some kind of a strange place, get all twisted up emotionally and so forth. But through the practice of centering prayer, you're able to shed all that, just go on about your business.
Mm. So tonight, Chuck, we are actually going to take a veering off of our normal routine of doing the Numa Divina reading, where we take multiple passes of that. We thought, as long as we're dealing with the gift of emptiness, let's actually do 5 minutes of silence. I know, scary. Don't leave the studio. 5 minutes of silence, and which we're about to get into before then coming, and then we'll come back to you afterwards. But if you were to make use of 5 minutes of emptiness like that, how would you negotiate that complete silence if you were trying to step into the presence of something, a more sacred space?
Well, the first thing I would do would be to get myself comfortable, seated comfortably with both feet on the ground, preferably with a straight back chair, and just try to quiet down, maybe focus on my breathing, just try to breathe in, breathe out, and just sort of, I would ask the Holy Spirit to lead me and guide me through this 5 minutes and allow me to be present to whatever the Spirit wishes to reveal to me.
Great. Well, we're going to try that right now. We're actually going to also work on kind of something that happens on an unconscious level that you can use as a prayer technique or discipline for short periods of time. It tends to break down if you use it too much. So just every now and again, you can actually make use of your body's own internal body clock. And the way it works is this: we're going to set a timer for 5 minutes exactly. We'll tell you exactly when we're starting it. But then we invite you simply to let go. Don't try to pay attention to how much time has passed. But simply do what Chuck said. Can I step into that space? And then as thoughts drift by, don't try to control them very much. Just simply notice them, their drift. Just be an observer of your own self. And then at the exact moment the 5 minute mark is up, we're going to ring a bell. Pay attention to whatever thought or picture was in your mind at that 5 minute mark. Your subconscious actually is a very good keeper of time. If you've ever had to get up at a strange hour, 4 o'clock in the morning or 5 o'clock in the morning, and you had to be up, you know how you oftentimes will wake up just before your alarm goes off. Your body can actually time that very well. And oftentimes if there's a message that that needs to come to the surface, your subconscious will throw that up if it knows you'll be paying attention at a certain time. So let's simply do what Chuck says, get comfortable. And we invite you, if you're watching this later on a recorded episode, or if you're listening to this as a podcast, this will work for you too if you will pay attention. It doesn't always work, so no promises here, but frequently, if you'll do this, and you can repeat this for a few times, this coming week or month, but you can't just do it over and over again. It will actually yield some pretty interesting fruit. So let's simply start that timer right now for 5 minutes, and let's simply experience the silence. Pay attention to whatever comes by. what was on your mind when that bell rang. We invite you to carry that with you and turn whatever that was during our musical feature. Then we'll be right back with Chuck Marohnic.
My portion and my cup, you alone make my portion feel secure. Lord, in you I take refuge. Keep me safe, oh God. Fill us with eternal joy.
Thanks, Carol. Always a treat to have Carol Rogers with us. Well, I was just kind of taking a look at the chat. I've noticed people online. There's been comments about the Pneuma itself. One writes, the silence went by faster than I thought it would. but I enjoy the Pneuma Divina practice and reflection. I was not as focused with the silence. The silence was new for me, though. My head is always so busy. It was good to practice both. The silence, another comment, the silence helped me try to hear what I may not have given space to before I was actually quiet. Another writes, silence allowed me to listen. Well, Chuck, it's good to have you back with us again, and we do have a question that a viewer has posed. I thought maybe I would throw that out and see if any of your disciplines of silence and emptiness might engage this question in any way. One viewer writes that what if you feel that God has asked you to do something? What if you feel that God has asked you to do something and you haven't done it yet? Does it affect your relationship with God, or does the divine just shake their head like something, like I do, and go, sheesh, someday she'll get it? Does the divine just shake the divine's head and like I do and go, sheesh, someday she'll get it? If you were asking that question, how would you explore it with your own spiritual disciplines?
It's a very good question. I would first of all not take it so seriously to the point that God is asking me to do something right away. I would ask the Holy Spirit to help me discern that through that process, to try to find out just what God is trying to get me to do or ask of me. And it's not. I don't think it's not. It's not going to be like a human conversation. It's not all of a sudden I'm just not going to hear this thing and go and do this or do that. No, it's not. It doesn't come that way. It comes in the form of probably will come in the form of maybe you'll feel an impulse to want to do something, maybe something that's different you haven't tried before. You pray about it, you ask about it, you ask help and guidance in that. You will gradually be led to it, and you'll find yourself, you trust the process, you'll be led to something that you haven't expected before. So the key is to not to try to second guess God in any way. You just have to just sort of be open and willing to change and willing to willing to let things happen in your life. And I think maybe you might want to revisit that question, maybe on a daily basis, over a week's time, maybe in 2 weeks' time. There's no rush. As humans, we are programmed to rush into everything. We're programmed and conditioned for immediate response. We want things instantly. These iPhones and iPads and all this crap that we have in our lives right now, they train us that way. We can get faster and faster downloads and so forth and so on. What we're talking about here is the antithesis of that. There is no rush to judgment. We have to be willing to take things slowly, very slowly. So let something gradually start to happen in your life, and then take a deeper look at it. See how it's affecting your relationship with other people and other things that you're doing in your life. If you see positive results and positive fruit coming from it, then you're probably on the right track.
Yeah, I wonder too if in embracing the Darkwood gift of emptiness, I think might also fruitful practice might be to actually describe the emptiness of one's own response. Meaning, like in my own personal path, there are times where I will feel like God is nudging me in a certain direction, and I'll usually, one of the ways I conclude that it's coming from God is that it keeps coming back. And so I don't.
Yes.
You can't rush it. That God isn't a used car salesman saying, act now, otherwise it'll be gone.
Right.
In fact, that's usually
That's
a
right.
good warning sign. Don't pay attention to that voice. But it keeps coming back, even if I try to throw it away, it comes back, and it keeps producing an intuition that is positive, a joyful or deeply peaceful, even if it's calling me into a difficult way of being, but it produces a deep sense of, or quiet sense of peace or joy. But there are times where I feel that and it keeps coming back and I resist. And what I try to do at those times is name my resistance as accurately and precisely as possible. In other words, embrace fully and claim the emptiness of my response.
Yeah.
Like, God, I am resistant to this, and here's exactly why I feel like I'm resisting.
Yeah, I remember reading something that Mother Teresa had written. And she said, God doesn't need you to build another hospital. He doesn't, in my case, he doesn't need for you to write another song. Or in your case, he doesn't need for you to give another sermon. All God really wants is for us to love him. That's it. Just to love God. And if we can open ourselves to that, to open ourselves to God's love, then it will have magical ramifications on our lives and other people around us.
Yeah. That's a really good point I think you make there too, is that we're not doing this for God. In a sense, we are loved by God. Also, we're asked to love God, but God loves us back, and that which God then might nudge us to do, it's to make us more fully human. It's to make us more fully engaged with this life.
Yes.
And so God never asks us to do something that's contrary to fullness of life, even if it leads to our own death. Right?
Yes. When we love God, then everything in our life makes sense. Everything makes sense. Even tragedy, even death makes sense. Everything makes sense when we love God. Whenever we try to put our own stamp of approval on what we think God wants from us, it usually ends up screwing things up. So if we keep an open mind, again, to quote Thomas Keating, is for his wonderful book on centering prayer called Open Mind, Open Heart. It's really quite simple. It's not complex at all. It's just really a question of being completely true to God, and in love is not an emotional such a thing. It's a complete surrender to whatever that will is and whatever is happening in our life. And as I said, everything works. Everything makes sense.
Well, I guess I must not love God very much because not everything makes sense to me yet. But I'm working on that.
Well, I understand. I agree with you. I wanted to make one point about going back to the Numa situation, and it has to do with the silence factor. Because we're so conditioned to noise, in the external noise, and that which becomes internal noise, it's noise. When we start to appreciate silence, then things that happen there's more depth to things. It's sort of like a contrast. If the beauty of looking at a painting, for example, is not so much as looking just at an object in the painting, but looking at the varying shades of darkness and shadows and so forth, and all of the subtle things that work around the object to bring it out. In other words, the silence of the painting is where the beauty is at. I want to take just a moment here and try to, if you don't mind, do something with the piano. Can you hear this?
Absolutely.
Can you hear that?
Yep.
Okay. All right. I'm gonna play you. I'm gonna play you a beautiful, what I think is a beautiful melody. Okay, you ready?
Yeah.
Good. Did you hear it?
I did.
You did? Well, you're a better man than I am.
Well, I heard a bunch of notes anyway.
Well, that's right. Okay, so now the problem the beauty of the melody is in that mess of notes. The trick is let's put some silence. Let's put some silence in there between the notes, some space between the notes, and see what happens. Well, if I start off with just 5 notes, let's just go with those 5 notes, all right? Mm-hmm. Now, if I play them as I just did, you hear them one way. However, what if I do this? of a sudden a melody emerges, right? And the reason that the melody emerges is because I'm giving respect to the silence around the notes. So the beauty of the melody is being enhanced and supported by the silence around the notes. If I just rush through the notes, I'm losing contact with the beauty of the melody. And the same thing is true in everything that we encounter in life, no matter what it is. If we step back and be quiet for a moment and don't rush to judgment, eliminate judgment, and become detached from it and just observe it, we'll see it for what it really is, or at least get closer to what's really there. So it becomes a challenge for us to avoid the rapid pace of life and this confusion that we live in, to step back and be quiet, to take our time to evaluate things. My wife is constantly telling me I eat too fast, and she's right. And that's because I've been conditioned to do that from when I was a young man, young child, even a child. So, but I find that she's right, that when I slow down and I can savor one bite at a time, then it becomes a meaningful experience, not just something that I feel sensually, but something also that I feel physically. There's a physiology to it as well. It's healthier to eat that way. Yeah. It's healthier for us to be quiet and shut up for a while. We have one mouth and two ears. I think that's there for a reason.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Chuck, it's been great to have you back with us tonight on Darkwood Brew, and look forward to having you back again a little later on, a couple months from now, perhaps live here in the studio.
Sounds wonderful.
Yeah. All right. Well, I know you have a place to go at 6 o'clock your time, 7 o'clock your time. So given that it's 7, we're going to bid you adieu. And once again, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Eric. Blessings to all. Bye-bye.
Every week at Darkwood Brew, we conclude our time with this meal, which in essence really brings together the gift of emptiness, the terror of emptiness as well. We're reminded of that passage from 1 Samuel 16, where God had led Samuel to a place and where he had an expectation of something going to happen. And what was presented before him, he went through every single one of those expectations and came up with nothing, nada. Not one of those 7 sons that were before him had anything to do with being a king. And at this point, not being clairvoyant, not being omniscient, Samuel had to make a decision. Do I embrace the emptiness of this situation, even embrace the possibility that that God may not have led me to this place, that I may not be the prophet I'm thinking of, that this has all just been made up in my head even. Do I embrace that, admit that I have not found a king here? Or do I try to make something up just to maintain an old story? Well, at the base of the cross, all of our old stories are put to rest. We know that we can embrace our deepest emptiness, that it's safe because God has embraced that deep emptiness. As we're reminded on a night of betrayal and desertion, Jesus, the one who certainly he and the world had the expectations, was the Messiah, said, "My friends, this is my body and it's being broken for you. Do this as often as you eat of it in remembrance of me." So likewise, after supper, he took the cup, saying, "This is the cup of the new covenant in my blood, which is shed for you. Do this as often as you drink of it in remembrance of me." By eating this bread and drinking this cup, we remember Christ's death. we celebrate Christ's resurrection. And we know that there is no place of emptiness that we can go in this world that God hasn't been to first. And because God has been there first, the new story of our new beginning awaits us in that deepest place. We simply need to go there and embrace it. And it comes. It comes. The gifts of God for the people of God. I invite you, if you have juice and crackers or bread and wine, to join us this evening, wherever you are, in partaking of the feast.
Take my life and let it be consecrated, Lord, to Thee. Take my hands and let them move at the impulse of Thy love, at the impulse of Thy love. Take my feet and let them be swift and beautiful for Thee. Take my moments and my days, let them flow in ceaseless praise. Let them flow in ceaseless praise. Woo! Take my life and let it be consecrated, Lord, to Thee. Take my hands and let them move at the impulse of Thy love, at the impulse of Thy
Carol Rogers and the Brews Brothers playing a Chuck Marohnic tune. Earlier on, that is. Yeah, that's right. That wasn't a Chuck Marohnic. We are glad you could join us this evening, and are looking very much forward to our next series. Next series being a series called Drawn In, Living Out the Creative Life with God. This is a series in which we step into occasionally where we focus on one particular guest throughout the whole series, so you get to know this person in depth and what makes them tick and what makes them creative. This is Troy Bronsink, who is a Presbyterian minister, but also an incredible musical artist as well, and does visual arts. Just a basic creative guy who's got a great book on living the creative life. We'll be with him for 6 weeks as we start our new series, which begins again next week. Go out on their blogs too, and we have reflections that are normally offered all week long, and on our Facebook too. We invite you to join us there. Until then, my friends, may the Spirit of the living God, made known to us most fully in Jesus Christ our Lord, go before you to show you the way, go above you to watch over you, go behind you to push you into places you may not necessarily go yourself, but may put you into the start of the next story, the next chapter in your story. Go beneath you to uphold you and uplift you. Go beside you to be your strong companion. And dwell within you to remind you that you are surely not alone. You are not alone. you are not alone, and you are loved, loved beyond your wildest imagination. And may the fire of God's blessing burn brightly upon you and within you, now and always. Amen.